Boothbay's annual shootout. At this time, I'm going to ask if you would all stand, please, and pledge allegiance to the American flag. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before you sit down, I'd ask you to turn around and introduce yourself, shake hands with somebody that you don't know. Because that way when you leave tonight, you'll know the name of the person you're not speaking to. It's always a privilege to be asked to moderate this meeting, especially when I think of the many outstanding citizens of this town who have filled this position for well over 100 years, and so this has been a tradition. Free elections and town meetings are privileges that many countries around the world do not have, so I thank you for exercising your right by voting today and by attending. As always, I pledge to try and do my best to be fair to everybody, while at the same time keeping the meeting moving as recommended by the Maine Municipal Association. Just a few ground rules before we start. I will, to the best of my ability, be guided by the Maine Moderator's Manual. They recommend more than anything else simplicity and common sense should prevail wherever possible. They suggest that entertaining negative motions, that is, motions to dismiss, are not a good idea. So it's always been something that I've done, and it usually is okay. There will, however, be one Passover article here tonight. I'll explain that to you when we get there. Please, when you would like to speak, raise your hand. I'll recognize you. And if your voice is loud enough, you can speak right where you are. Otherwise, you're probably going to have to come to the microphone so that everybody can hear. Or if you want to come anyway to the microphone, then by all means do so. If you are not a registered voter of the town of Boothbay, we ask that you please sit in the two back benches. It used to be up in the balcony, but the two back side benches, kind of the very back, if you are not a resident. And if you desire to speak, it requires a 2/3 vote of the House to approve your right to speak. So with that, we will begin with the secret ballot articles, and the first of which was Article 2. You have by secret ballot elected two selectmen, Douglas Burnham and Stephen Cam. For trustee, the Boothbay Region Water District, Christopher R. Higgins. A member of the Boothbay Harbor Superintendent Committee, Brian C. Bleffin. Trustee of Boothbay Harbor Schools, Tyler R. Hodgson. And trustee, Boothbay Harbor Cemetery District, Lorraine E. Hodgson. Congratulations, you folks who come forward, that I might swear you into your office, please. Raise your hand and I will say I, and then you say your name, okay? I,
Brian Bleffin,
do swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and I will support the Constitution of the United States
and of this state,
so long
as I shall continue a citizen thereof,
so long as I shall continue a citizen thereof.
I will faithfully discharge to the best of my abilities
Faithfully discharge to the best of my ability
the duties incumbent on me
the duties incumbent on me
in the office that I have been elected to,
in the office that I have been elected to,
according to the Constitution and the laws of the state of Maine,
according to the Constitution and the laws of the state of Maine,
so help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations. Okay, Article 3, the so-called TIF article, that passed 289 to 214. Article 4, the Smith property article, that also passed 387 to 125. Article 5, the secret ballot one, in other words, the vote as to whether or not you would have open town meetings like this. You voted that you would not have open town meetings. It would all be secret ballot, 295 to 210. So those are Articles 2 through 5. At this time, your Board of Selectmen are down here. I think you can see their name tags and everything, and your town manager, Jim Chiosis, is sitting here. And at this time, he has some awards.
Can everybody hear me in the back? Frank, give me a thumbs up if you. Excellent. So, please indulge me for a little bit. We wanted to recognize some people. And I put together a few words while we recognize them. You know, one of the greatest speeches in American history is President Abraham Lincoln's Gettysburg Address. And he declares that government of the people, by the people, for the people shall not perish from the earth. And although President Lincoln was boldly referencing one of the most divisive moments in our nation's history, his words were very precise in referencing what American government was and continues to be, the people. And now, just recently, President Barack Obama proclaimed the week of April 6th through the 12th as National Volunteer Week, as traditionally done by other presidents over the years. And locally, we've recognized a lot of volunteers. I don't know if anybody noticed, the Register did a special piece about all of the areas that volunteers have helped in this region. So nothing could be more appropriate than the town of Boothbay recognizing some of their volunteers, because they constitute the strength of our local government, and they are quite literally the people that make the government operate. 1 in 32 residents in the town of Boothbay is a volunteer to our local government. The town cannot operate without these volunteers. We have approximately 40 firefighters. You see one of their new toys out back. That keeps them motivated to run and fight fires. 35 standing committee members, 25 volunteer appointed officials, and numerous people that donate time and energy to the town, and unlimited volunteer support in this community. It's really outstanding. And these volunteers are not reserved to simple duties and easy duties. Selectmen are processing the same level of sophisticated issues that their state counterparts face when they're in Augusta. Planning board members are doing work that is done by trained planning professionals in other towns. Firefighters are running into burning buildings. And then they go and punch the clock and show up to their primary duty at some other place. So this year, the selectmen struggled with the appropriate way to recognize some of these amazing people who run our town. And they ultimately decided that there is no commemorative method that appropriately rewards them in relation to their sacrifice. Words do not represent the debt of gratitude that the town has for these volunteers, but we're going to try anyway. And since we cannot thank every single volunteer that participates for the town, we're going to recognize a few that are extraordinary. And the first is actually a staff member. I would like to point out that our newest staff member, Heidi Fuller, put together the annual report that most of you have in your hands, which came out beautifully, and it's really hard to put that together. It may seem like some of the aspects of that fall in place. The hardest people to get to turn in their reports are our federal representatives. But it's fun and rewarding, and thank you, Heidi, for putting that together. Another person that I would like to speak of, she's not here tonight, and I assumed that she would be here, but I've heard that she is not feeling well. But this lady started her local government volunteer work providing administrative support to standing committees. But it didn't take very long before she was serving the town in a more involved manner. Nancy Lowell Cunningham spent more than a decade serving the town, and several of those years as chairwoman of the Boothbay Planning Board. And Nancy oversaw many of the most difficult development applications in town in recent memory, and also some that never made the press reels. And when you consider hers and her husband Chuck Cunningham's volunteer commitment to the town, no household has invested more time and dedication to the town of Boothbay in the last decade. So in recognition of Ms. Cunningham's dedication and investment to the town has bought her a small gift and some flowers, and I'm going to present those to Chuck if you would. We assume that she might be here. You'll look really nice with those flowers. And then I want to pause for a moment to give her a round of applause, even though she's not here, because it's for her. The last person that we'd like to recognize, and definitely not the least, I mean, there's a lot of people to recognize that do volunteer work in the town. But this last lady that we're going to recognize, the board had a clandestine meeting just recently, where we asked the Channel 7 to shut off the camera, and we asked Ryan not to report, because we wanted to keep it a secret that we were going to do this. But the Board of Selectmen signed a resolution a few weeks ago stating that this volunteer is the 2014 Spirit of America Award. So I'm going to read the resolution that they had signed. So a resolution of the Board of Selectmen. Whereas the town of Boothbay desires to honor the Spirit of America Award, recognizing and commending organizations, people, and projects for their community service. And whereas Estelle Appel has served for a decade, volunteering. Go ahead, I think that's appropriate. Estelle Appel has served for a decade, volunteering her personal time to positions for the town of Boothbay, including the Planning Board, Board of Appeals, voting clerk, and honestly we could go on and on and on. These very important jobs are a small sample of Estelle Appel's volunteer spirit as she volunteers for the Boothbay Civic Association and other community enhancing organizations. And whereas the town of Boothbay recognizes the honorable, conscientious, and reverent manner in which Estelle Appel has always represented the town while providing valuable and needed skills to various volunteer boards and committees she served. And whereas Estelle Appel does not solicit accolades, awards, or praise for her civic-minded efforts in serving the town and always puts the town before her own needs. And whereas the town has declared by recent policy to identify the long-serving appointees of the town with appropriate recognition for their service in order to continue the generous civic spirit represented in Boothbay history. Be it therefore resolved that the town of Boothbay awards 2014 Spirit of America Award to Estelle Appel, and that the town is gracious of her support to our residents, signed by our Board of Selectmen. Estelle, could you come forward? we have a gift. We have a gift for Estelle. We had a custom Boston rocker put together with the town of Boothbay seal, Estelle's name, and their years of service. And I think the selectmen would be honored if you'd sit here.
I'm not ready for the rocking chair yet.
And I think most people doubt that Estelle is going to sit in her rocker. Probably going to be off volunteering somewhere.
Yeah,
Congratulations.
thank you.
All right. Okay, we'll move on to Article 6. See if the town will vote to establish that the first installment of taxes for fiscal year 2015 is due and payable on August 20th, 2014, and the second installment of taxes is due and payable on February 11th, 2015, and to charge 7% rate of interest on delinquent taxes, and to set the interest rate to be paid by the town on abated taxes at 3%, pursuant to 36 MRSA paragraph 506A, and to authorize such interest paid or abatements granted to be appropriated from overlay funds or, if necessary, from surplus, and to authorize the town collector to accept prepayment of taxes not yet committed pursuant to 36 MRSA paragraph 506. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And seconded. Are there any questions or comments on Article 6? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, this vote. Article 7. To see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to apply for and accept state and federal grants, including CDBG applications and grants from nonprofit organizations, donations, or revenues on the town's behalf for municipal purposes, including, when necessary, the authority to sign grant contracts, documents, or other paperwork, and to accept the conditions that accompany grant funds, and to appropriate and expend grant funds and or other funds for authorized purposes as the Board of Selectmen deems to be in the best interests of the town during the fiscal year 2015. Board of Selectmen recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And seconded. Means are you going to allow them to accept money? Okay? Any questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, this is vote. Article 8. To see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to dispose of town-owned, non-tax acquired property deemed excess, whether real or personal, under such terms and conditions as they deem advisable, provided, however, that if the property has a value of more than $500, disposal must be by a competitive bid or auction process. Board of Selectmen recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 8? Yes, ma'am.
How is the amount determined, the value of? Who decides whether it's worth over 500 or under 500?
Would somebody like to address that, Mr. Joseph?
So the question was, how do we determine the value of the piece of equipment or property that is going to be sold? And I'd say that the selectmen would probably estimate the value of that. And I think in reference to this article, they would probably be very conservative. If it was $750 to $1,000, they'd probably err on the side of caution that it may possibly be approximately 500.
Okay. Any other questions or comments on Article 8? There being none, all those please signify in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, this vote. Article 9. To see if the town will vote to authorize the selectmen to carry forward any unexpended account balances as they deem advisable, and to authorize the selectmen to set at a later date the amount of surplus, if any, to be used to reduce property tax assessment. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 9? Many of these articles are just generic. They're in every single town meeting, every one. We have to decide on. Questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is opposed. Article 10. To see if the town will vote to appropriate funds received from the state of Maine pursuant to the Rural Road Initiative for capital improvements to local roads and or state aid, minor collectors. Board of Selectmen recommendation is approval. Motion, please.
So moved.
And
Seconded.
any questions or comments on Article 10? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is voted. Article 11. And this article here has a number of line items in it, and you will be free to ask questions on any one of them. The documents, documentation's on the yellow sheets. And Article 11, fiscal year 2015 budget we're talking about now. To see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $1,796,413 for the town of Boothbay municipal budget, made up of $510,658 for the general government account, $395,193 for public safety account, $713,213 for the public works account, $10,000 for the general assistance account, $108,200 for the service account, $10,949 for the debt service account, $48,200 for the insurance account. Board of Selectmen recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. As I said, in the back of your town report, there you will find on the yellow sheets the explanations for all of these things and total. So I'll give you a minute to go ahead and look at it, and you're free to ask questions on any one of those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 accounts that we're talking about. So if anybody is already there with a question, feel free to. Did I ask for more? Yeah, I did. Okay. Yes, ma'am. Would you please stand?
Could you tell me the difference or why you left out the capital improvement line item so that the budget figure on the last page is different than the budget figure in the warrant article?
Mr. Chambers.
So the question was, in this article, in Article 11, why did we leave out the capital improvement portion, but then in the summary in the back page, it represents the capital improvement. And if you see, if you remove the $140,000 that is the capital improvement fund, that it does come out to $1,796,413. Generally, by past meetings, people have liked to see that total number with the capital improvement money put together, because when it comes down to taxes, that is the most relevant number. But when it comes down to approval at town meeting, it's important to have the capital improvement fund and the operating budget approved in 2 different articles. So the summary is more for tax purposes. The question is more for legislative approval purposes. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Thank you.
It will be covered also, I think, in Article 23. Any other questions or comments on Article 11, please? There being none, all those in favor of Article 11, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? It is voted. Article 12, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $146,155 for ambulance services. The Board of Selectmen recommendation is of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 12, please? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? Article 13, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $15,000 for the Boothbay Region Cemetery District. Board of Selectmen's recommendation is that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 13? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 14, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $45,000 for the Boothbay Harbor Memorial Library. Board of Selectmen recommendation that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved and
Seconded.
seconded. Any questions or comments? All those in favor of Article 13, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 15, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $3,000 for the town of Boothbay Harbor Fireworks Fund. Board of Selectmen recommendation and approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 15? All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 16, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $367,511 for the Boothbay Region Refuse Disposal District. Board of Selectmen's recommendation is that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Questions or comments on Article 16? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? There's a vote. Are the Red Sox playing tonight or something? Hey, I love you guys. All right. Article 17, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $20,000 for the Boothbay Region Community Television. Board of Selectmen recommendation is that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 17? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it's a vote. Opposed can stay. Article 18, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $2,000 for the Boothbay Region Historical Society. Board of Selectmen recommendation that of approval. Motion, please.
So moved.
And
Seconded.
questions or comments on Article 18? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, this is vote. Article 19, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $9,948 for the Boothbay Region District Nursing Association. Board of Selectmen recommendation approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
questions or comments on Article 19? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, there's a vote. Article 20, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $300 for the American Legion Charles Sherman Post number 36. Board of Selectmen recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 20? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? It's a vote. Article 21, to see if the town will vote to raise and appropriate the sum of $915 for New Hope for Women. Board of Selectmen recommendation, approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 21? There being none. All those in favor, please signify, raise your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 22, to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $847,471 from estimated revenues to reduce the property tax assessment. Board of Selectmen recommendation is that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 22? There being none, all those in favor, please signify, raise your hand. Those opposed, this vote. Folks, there's about 15 articles left. Would anybody be willing to make a motion that we just accept them all? I didn't think so. Article 23, to see if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of, this is the lady that asked the question back there, I think part of the answer is here. See if the town will vote to appropriate the sum of $80,000 from the capital improvement reserve account and to raise and appropriate the sum of $140,000 for implementation of the capital improvement plan. Board of Selectmen's recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
all right, any questions or comments on Article 23? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Okay, and when I started tonight, I mentioned there would be one article that would not be necessary. We could pass over it. It's basically to see if the town will vote by written ballot to increase the property tax levy limit established by state law in the event that the municipal budget for the fiscal year 2015 approved under the preceding articles will result in a tax commitment that is greater than the property tax levy limit. So that is not the case. So, Mr. Chassis.
So, Mr. Moderator, I would make a motion that we pass over Article 24 because legally the question is moot.
Do I have a second on that?
Seconded.
Okay. Do you understand why it is not necessary because of what you voted does not exceed limits, and so this article is not necessary. So if you are in favor of the motion to pass over this, would you please signify by raising your hand? Those opposed. Those opposed. Okay, beginning with Article 25, these are the so-called ordinance chain amendments, okay, and zoning ordinance and things. And each of you, or if you were interested when you came in tonight, there is an ordinance information packet, okay, that explains each one of these. But you still feel free to ask a question. All right, here we go with Article 25. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding miscellaneous matters be enacted as shown on Attachment B? The Board of Selectmen and the Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 25? Mr. Chelsea.
I would like to demonstrate the information that we put before town meeting. So the attachments that are referred to in the next few articles are in the information packet that was in at the table when you walked in. If you look to the top right-hand corner, you'll see where it references the attachment A, B, C, D, and then where it references the warrant article 25, 26, 27. So as we go through these, if you have a comment or a question, then it makes it easy for everybody to reference the same page, which we've also numbered at the bottom, so that everybody can stay on these very complicated ordinance questions.
So basically the first 8 pages of the explanations are for warrant Article 25, labeled Attachment B. Are there any questions or comments on Article 25, please? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 26, shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding the Industrial Park District be enacted as shown on Attachment C. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. Questions or comments? The explanation is on page 9 of the ordinance information sheets. Questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, there's a vote. Article 27, shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding the official zoning map be enacted as shown on Attachment D. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please? Moved and
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 27? Yes, Mr. Chelsea.
In essence, this question is asking to adopt this map that we have at the front of the room, and additionally on page 11 in your information packets, it's minor deviations in the zoning ordinance, some of which may be minuscule to most people, but have been identified by the planning board as appropriate changes.
Yes, ma'am.
Could you explain what the proposed village change is, the little pink?
So the question is to explain the change to the village plan. And we had a couple of public hearings in which we discussed this issue, but I'm going to try to explain it through narration, and please let me know if I'm not explaining it correctly. In the East Boothbay area, we have a marine commercial district, and then we have the village district, and that abut one another. And because of their design, there ends up being a section of general residential that fits in neither one of those categories, but is also segregated so that it kind of is on an island by itself in a zone. The proposal in that village area is then to make that general residential village, which all of the existing uses that are there are consistent. This would just allow more opportunity for uses in that area. Does that answer your question, ma'am?
Yes, thank you.
Any additional questions on Article 27? Thank you. There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, this vote. Article 28, shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding definitions be enacted as shown on Attachment E. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And it's been moved and seconded. The article is on the floor. Do I have any questions or comments on Article 28? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, those opposed. Article 29. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding uses in the C1 district be enacted as shown on attachment F. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions on Article 29? Yes, ma'am. Please stand if you would.
Why is warehousing now being added?
So the question is, essentially the bottom, this article, Article 29, is taking warehousing, which was previously prohibited in the C1 district. The C1 district is the northern commercial district of town. By definition, warehousing is stockpiling of materials, which is being done quite in a lot of places in that district, and it was brought to the planning board's attention. Is this an allowed use? So warehousing is I'm not sure if it's the appropriate definition all the time by a layman, but it's definitely, when you look at the definition in the ordinance, it specifies that warehousing is stockpiling of material. If that doesn't answer your question, we also have the code officer here.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am, for your question. Any other questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor? Who signify by raise your hand, all those opposed? All right, this vote. I was more interested in watching Mr. Breyer over here wipe the sweat off his brow. All right, Article 30. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding height limitations in the C3 district be enacted as shown on attachment G. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 30? Yes, ma'am.
Can somebody just clarify for me the last point about the 44 feet? Is that in the proposed country club, or is that, I don't know what building that is, or has it been? Is there a reason you added this for the 44 feet?
You want Mr. J. Ossis or Mr. Bryan? Look, he's got his hand raised. All right.
We're going to actually call up our code officer who's worked with the planning board on putting together this definition to explain how it works.
Essentially, it's a very specific area. As you can see, it's 250 feet off of Route 27 along Country Club Road. So this was kind of thinking towards the future if there was going to be further development within that commercial zone. We already have two existing areas that allow 54 feet within the town, the maritime and the industrial. So this isn't an anomaly. This is something that already exists within the town. We just realized C3 is our most aggressive commercial zone. So we were trying to make an amendment.
So it wasn't specific to any special request?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. No.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody with a follow-up question for Mr. Bryan? All right. Any other questions or comments? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, tis the vote. Article 31. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding uses in the Industrial Park District be enacted as shown on attachment H? Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. I have a motion, please? And second. Questions or comments, please? Yes, ma'am.
I'd like to know what the plan is for mineral extraction in the industrial park district. Why are we doing that, and is that not a problem when it comes to the water quality in the area?
Okay.
I'm going to call up Dan again. We all enjoy his presence.
So specifically, and it sounds, I think, a little more devious, I suppose, mineral exploration and extraction, and essentially just talking about dirt works, things of that sort. And we have Neil Rennie, who exists within the industrial park. And the specific language is that it has to fall outside of the watershed overlay. And there is a small section that goes up, I think, around the American Legion and the Tibex storage area. So it wouldn't be allowed in that area. Essentially, we're just talking about business right now. Does that answer the?
Well, is there actually a gravel pit there?
I don't know if you'd necessarily call it a gravel pit, but essentially it's saying that, yeah, if you wanted to have that for storage, or if another business wanted to, because again, it's been identified as our industrial park, so I think just to kind of keep in line with some of the uses that we're looking for.
Well, I'm just trying to make sure I understand the difference between storing a pile of gravel or dirt and excavating a pile of gravel.
Yeah, so essentially, yes, you could take some of that gravel if it was appropriate for the use that you were looking for. Yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yep.
Thank you.
Is there another one before I?
So there's no intention for any, you're not looking for any specific minerals or mines?
No, ma'am. Like I said, it sounds a little different than
Okay.
the actual use. Get me on the hook.
All right. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, folks. Any other questions on Article 31? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is vote. Article 32. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding subsurface wastewater disposal be enacted as shown on Attachment I. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And,
Seconded.
okay, questions or comments on Article 32? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, vote. Article 33. You hanging in the stall in that rocking chair? Oh, yeah. All right. Okay. Article 33, shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding signs generally be enacted as shown on Attachment J. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please? So moved. And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 33? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, take the vote. Article 34. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding sign placement standards be enacted as shown on Attachment K. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Motion, please.
So moved.
And
Seconded.
okay, questions or comments on Article 34? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, vote. Article 35. Shall an ordinance entitled 2014 Amendments to the Zoning Ordinance of the Town of Boothbay regarding non-conforming signs be enacted as shown on Attachment L. Board of Selectmen and Planning Board recommend approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 35? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed, it is a vote. Article 36. To see if the town will vote to authorize the Board of Selectmen to enter into a multi-year lease not to exceed 5 years with Kickstart Stables for the use of town-owned property located between 119 and 165 Country Club Road, Assessors Map R-7, Lot 5, for use as a grazing field for nearby stables on such terms and conditions as the Board of Selectmen deem to be in the best interest of the town. Board of Selectmen's recommendation is approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Moved and
Seconded.
seconded. Questions or comments on Article 36? Yes, sir.
Have you done any studies based on uptake into the grass and, you know, the
I'll repeat the question. The gentleman asked if we've done any studies about the ground, because obviously we're talking about the landfill property. I guess legally that doesn't make any sense to put landfill, so we identified it by the assessor's tax maps. We did bring DEP in to give us their professional assessment on whether this was, first of all, legally allowed use or allowable use, and secondly, if we would be looking at any damages to our landfill, because we spend a significant amount of money studying that every other year for the groundwater quality. And DEP's formal report said that they didn't see any issues with it as long as we didn't disturb a certain level of the topsoil. We've written that into the lease so there would be an understanding that if there is disturbance that the property lessor is responsible for it. Does that answer your question?
Not really. I was more concerned that if there's any uptake from the landfill into the vegetation, so that that would harm the animals that are eating it. In other words, I'm not familiar that that would be an issue because I don't know what the groundwater shows. But if you're planting something on contaminated soil, there is uptake from the soil into the plants. So unless you know what that contamination could be, I would be concerned if I were the animals. That's all I'm saying.
So the question is any of this possibly damaged groundwater affecting the vegetation on the top of the landfill? The answer is we don't test it. We don't test the vegetation, we test only the groundwater, and the groundwater is well within any acceptable limits because we have to test that every other year by mandate for I guess that's the legal process in capping a landfill. So we have plenty of studies that show the groundwater, and I would assume that if the groundwater is safe, that hopefully the vegetation is, but I don't have any verifiable proof.
So Jim, the town would not be liable, we're not setting ourselves up for anything. You're pretty confident that it's a safe area to graze.
Well, I can't vouch for the quality of the grass on top of it. But I can say that we have worked into our lease that the Kickstart Stables would be responsible for providing insurance of the town. So the town is going to be protected through insurance. So we're pretty confident that the town has protected its interest.
Jeff, DEP said they had no concerns, right? So that they would be the ones that would have the concern of whether or not the vegetation would be harmful.
So Selectman Chuck Cunningham was stating that DEP they wrote us a very lengthy letter. Maybe I should have brought it, but I thought it would be hard for town meeting to read it. But DEP didn't see any issues with this at all. That was actually surprising to us. Kickstart Stables approached us to see if they could use that. And my first answer was, I have no clue. This is outside of charted waters. We brought DEP, we did it in on-site. DEP is very confident that this is safe.
Thank you for the question. Yes, ma'am.
How close to Country Club Road are they going to be allowed to graze?
We haven't, the question was how close to Country Club Road will they be allowed to graze? We actually haven't gone into that level of sophistication yet. We put together a model lease that we provided for town meeting to to see what type of lease we would probably enter into. But I think what we do is we go out and we do a site visit and say, where do you want to put fence in? Are we agreeable to that? Build that into the body of the lease before the selectmen approve it.
Being someone who lives in that area, what goes in must come out. What if it becomes a real odor problem and a real problem that you then what happens if 5 years is not up?
So the question is, how does the town, and I'm ad-libbing a little bit, how does the town mitigate some of the issues that may come from the use of that property that's not ordinarily how it's been used? And I think probably the proper way is to make that use go through the normal planning process that we have established by code, where we notify the abutters and see if that is an allowable use according to the planning board. Does that answer your question?
Okay. Yes, sir.
What's the concentration of methane released at this point? Don't know, Steve.
So the question was the concentration of methane that's coming from the landfill. I don't know off the top of my head, but I heard the chairman whisper it, so I'm going to hand him the mic.
To my knowledge, there is no methane coming out of there anymore. The landfill used to have to be tested quarterly. It went to semi-annually, annually, and now it's every other year. So, I mean, it's pretty much extinct, and you can't do much with it.
Yes, ma'am?
You mentioned the DEP said that as long as a certain amount of the soil or level, depth, whatever, was not disturbed. What is that depth?
So the question was, the DEP had referenced a certain amount of topsoil couldn't be damaged. I think it was approximately 2 feet from memory. So it was a substantial amount. I mean, something you would notice before you got to a problem area.
Because horses aren't going to eat probably what's there. Whoever wants to graze an animal has to get something worth eating. So that would mean digging up and planting.
Any additional questions or comments on Article 36? There being none, all those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? It is a vote. Article 37. To see if the town will authorize the Board of Selectmen to transfer up to 10% of unexpended balances between amounts as needed. Board of Selectmen's recommendation is that of approval. Do I have a motion, please?
So moved.
And seconded. Questions or comments on Article 37? Yes, Mr. Justice.
I'd just like to explain why we put this new article in here. We obviously had a pretty tough winter this year, and we have account balances, mostly snow removal, that have over expended, where we'd have to go back to town meeting and ask for approval for those over expenditures. But we're also coming pretty close to the end of the year, and we have account balances that are under expended, quite a few. And this question allows us to take those under expended amounts and use them for the over expended amounts, and we've already projected that comes out to a net zero amount. So I think it's plausible to propose to town meeting that we exercise it this way rather than appropriate new monies or going through complicated other means for approval.
Okay. All those in favor of Article 37, please signify by raising your hand. Those opposed? It is a vote. Whenever I get home from one of these meetings, my wife always says, how were they? Tonight I'm going to say they were superb, because you were. Congratulations, and thank you to all the town officials, our town manager, the town clerk right here, and thank you folks most of all for coming, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn. And seconded. All those in favor, please stand and leave and have a safe drive home.